The email came on a Monday morning tucked between a grocery store coupon and a neighborhood zoning alert. The subject line read, Whitaker Reunion 2025. Save the date. No greeting. No hi, Mom. Just a forwarded invite sent from the family's shared Gmail, written in Sloane's unmistakably crisp tone. I opened it slowly, as if that might change the words. Looking forward to gathering with close family. Only this July, please RSVP directly to Sloane or Gray by the end of the month. Cabin assignments to follow, as always. Bring your smiles and sunscreen. I read it 3 times. My name wasn't in the to field. It wasn't mentioned anywhere, not even in the casual way. Looking forward to seeing Aunt Jerry, Nana Ione, and the cousins. Just silence. A sterile cheerfulness that felt almost weaponized. At first I told myself it was a mistake. A clerical slip. I even hovered over the reply button, fingers poised to write something light. Looks lovely, should I bring anything? But I stopped. Instead, I called Nadine. She answered on the second ring. I saw it, she said before I even spoke. Don't make excuses for her this time. I wasn't invited, was I? I asked. No, honey. I think that's pretty clear. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I was too embarrassed to ask if my name had come up at all. I already knew the answer. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of chamomile cooling, untouched beside me, and let the ache rise. Not the sharp kind, but the kind that moves, slow grief's cousin, disappointment. This wasn't new. It had been years since I'd been truly included. The last Christmas I mailed handmade blankets. No reply. 2 birthdays ago I texted Ari a video of us fishing from the old dock. Nice was the response. But this year stung differently. The reunion wasn't just any trip, it was at the lake house. Our lake house. The one Thomas built with his own hands, over 3 summers hauling wood and window panes in the back of a borrowed pickup. The same one where Sloane learned to swim. Where we scattered Thomas's ashes after his heart gave out one quiet October morning. That house hadn't been discussed since. It had just lingered. No one said who owned it now. After the funeral, Sloane took over all the legal logistics. Don't worry, Mom, I've got it. She had said, her voice sweet but tight. I hadn't set foot inside since. But when I opened a new tab and typed the property's name into the search bar, what came up made my breath stall. For sale, serene 4BR lakefront cabin, motivated seller. No mention of Whitaker. No note to me. No courtesy call. Just a listing tucked beneath a photo of pine trees and soft light spilling through shutters I once cleaned every spring. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a dare. I closed the browser tab, but didn't move. The cursor still blinked in my mind, counting off every second I had spent being quiet, being careful, being useful. There was a time I picked Ari up from school every weekday for 2 years straight. Rain, snow, late buses, I was always there. Sloane had just started her new consulting job and needed a safety net, her words. I stocked my freezer with dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets and kept extra markers on hand because Ari liked to draw on the backs of envelopes. I was never late. Not once. A few years later, Sloane and Gray were looking for a house outside Albany. I offered to help, not because they asked, but because I knew they wouldn't. I pulled $10,000 from the savings account Thomas and I built over decades, handed it over without paperwork. Don't be ridiculous, I said when Sloane asked if I needed a receipt. It's family. After Thomas passed, I was still fogged from grief when Sloane brought over a folder labeled Estate Admin Simplified. She sat at my dining table with her laptop open, explaining that it would be easier if she just handled things, bank transitions, property transfers, the trusts. You don't need the headache, Mom, she said. Just sign here, and I'll take care of everything. I didn't read most of it. My hands were shaking too badly. I signed. I don't think she was trying to hurt me then. Not actively. She's not cruel. But over time, her distance sharpened like a dull knife finally finding its edge. Let's not complicate this, Mom. It's just a long trip, we're keeping it small. Stay local this year, okay? I used to believe those things were just practical. Until I learned the lake house wasn't just for sale, it was listed under a shell company I'd never heard of. The agent's name was familiar, though. The same woman who handled my sister-in-law's estate when she passed. I called Nadine. Check the LLC, I told her. 2 days later, Nadine emailed me the registration forms. The LLC was signed into existence less than a year after Thomas died. No mention of me anywhere, just Sloan and a P.O. box. I stared at the scanned document. Neat, efficient, bloodless. They hadn't forgotten me. They were moving on without me quietly enough to avoid confrontation, but thoroughly enough to make sure I couldn't follow. I didn't cry. Not then. I closed the file, walked out to the porch, and sat in the old rocker Thomas built from pine and nails. The breeze off the hedgerow smelled like rain and dust. Inside, my tea had gone cold. The house was still. My phone buzzed once an ad for lawn fertilizer. I opened my drawer and pulled out the trust papers. The ones I'd stored away in a manila folder labeled Later. Later had just arrived. The trust papers were older than I remembered, creased at the edges, yellowing slightly, with Thomas's familiar looping signature on the final page. I hadn't looked at them since the week after the funeral. Back then, every line felt like another reminder that he was gone. This time, I read with purpose. Nadine came over that evening still wearing her office heels, hair pinned tight. She brought lemon cookies and a red pen. I figured you might need both, she said. Setting them on the table, we spread the documents across the dining room surface, side by side, page by page. It was mostly language we expected, division of assets, joint accounts, the standard legalese. Until she reached the back, an appendix I had never noticed. Tucked between insurance details and deed references was a clause titled Contingency for Mismanagement. She read aloud. In the event of delinquent property taxes, lapse of required maintenance records, or failure to reassign ownership post-mortem primary title, shall revert to the surviving spouse by default. I blinked. He put that in. Nadine looked at me. He must have. And I'm guessing Sloan didn't. I felt my breath catch. Would this hold up? She was already pulling out her phone. Give me 24 hours. The next day, she called from her office. It's worse than you think, she said. No property taxes filed since the second quarter of last year. No insurance renewal. No formal deed reassignment from the LLC to anyone. Legally, the house is in limbo. But the trust kicks in exactly for this reason. It's airtight. She paused, then softened. Ione, if you want it, it's yours. No fight required. Just a signature. I didn't answer right away. I sat with her words like a stone in my palm. Heavy, but not uninvited. Later that evening, I returned to the file and filled out the petition to claim reassignment. The form was simple, dry. A space for my name, a checkbox labeled surviving spouse. I signed and dated it. Then I opened the photo album. Not the one Sloan made for Thomas's memorial, hers had left out too much. No, this was the one I kept privately behind the blankets in the hallway closet. Inside were photos of the lake house from its earliest days. Thomas in cut-off jeans, laughing with a paintbrush in hand. The porch half-built. The pines just saplings. In one image, our initials were still wet in the concrete stoop. T+I. That was the summer he taught Ari how to skip stones. The same week, Sloan broke her arm, falling off the dock. I remembered bandaging it while Thomas called the clinic. We were a team then. I closed the album and stood my back stiff from sitting too long. I pressed the signed form into a new folder and sealed it. By the time the next morning came, I had already arranged the courier. No announcement. No email. I didn't need anyone's permission. The lake house wasn't up for discussion anymore. The final confirmation arrived on a Thursday. Transfer of property complete. Deed reissued under primary beneficiary Ione Whitaker. No fanfare. No objections. Just a quiet transaction folded into a morning inbox. I didn't forward the email to anyone. I printed the confirmation and slipped it into the same folder as the trust papers. Then I opened the online portal and booked the master suite for 3 nights, checking in Friday. Guest name, Mrs. Ione Whitaker. Under preferences, I typed, firm pillows, cotton sheets, full privacy. Please confirm guest registry is accurate. 2 hours later, a clerk named Bryn replied, confirmed, Mrs. Whitaker. We look forward to your stay. It was the first time in years someone had said my name like that, with recognition, not hesitation. I packed light. A suitcase, a cardigan Thomas used to wear around campfires, and the photo album from the hallway closet. I rented a sedan under a different name and arrived on Wednesday evening, 2 days before the others were set to check in. The lake house stood at the end of a gravel drive just where I remembered it, but it looked changed. Not worse, just leaner. Time had pulled the color from the shutters. The porch swing creaked unevenly in the wind. There were new stones along the walkway, but the old mailbox was still crooked, leaning slightly left like it remembered the weight of letters that once mattered. Inside the master suite had been made up already. Crisp sheets, a folded welcome card, a bottle of chilled water on the nightstand. The air smelled faintly of cedar, and something sweeter, maybe lemon polish, maybe memory. I didn't unpack. I just walked. Each room held pieces of a family that had existed more fully once. The scuff marks on the hallway wall from Ari's roller shoes. The kitchen drawer that stuck halfway. The faint stain on the upstairs carpet from the summer Sloan spilled cherry juice during a game of charades. No one had erased me from these things. They simply forgot who had held the towel, who had cleaned the floor. In the attic, I found a box marked seasonal. Inside was the wind chime Thomas and I made with Ari one summer afternoon. The shells were chipped. The thread had frayed, but it still held its shape. I brought it downstairs and hung it outside the kitchen window. It barely moved at first. Then, with one soft gust, it caught the wind and turned. I left the house just before dusk, locking the door behind me. I didn't take the main road. I parked 2 streets over beneath a canopy of trees. The sedan blended into the gravel, quiet and unremarkable. And then I waited. I watched from the shade of the rental car as the caravan pulled into the lot. Sloane's SUV led the way, silver, spotless, the kind of car with built-in seat warmers and a voice assistant that always sounds slightly condescending. Behind her was Gray's brother's van, followed by a small hatchback I didn't recognize. 3 cars, 8 people, one assumption. They unloaded with the ease of people who expected everything to go according to plan. Gray reached for the bags, while Ari wandered toward the porch phone in hand. Sloane wore white linen, the kind that wrinkles if you so much as exhale on it. She had sunglasses pushed to the top of her head and a clipboard in one hand. Always the organizer. Always the center. They approached the reception building as a group, voices, light laughter sprinkled in like seasoning. I waited a moment, then stepped out and followed the path around the back entrance just far enough to hear not to be seen. I didn't need to wait long. I'm sorry, the clerk said. Her voice was polite but clear. I don't have any of your names on the reservation. There was a pause. Sloane laughed once, a short, performative sound. That's not possible. This is the Whitaker reunion. We've booked this place for years. The clerk glanced at her screen. Yes, ma'am. The reservation is under Mrs. Ione Whitaker. She has the full property. 3 nights. Another silence. Not the kind that waits for clarity, the kind that rearranges the air. Excuse me, Sloane said. Her voice didn't rise, but the edge in it was unmistakable. That's not... She didn't... I stepped through the side entrance, then calm, steady. The The floor tiles were warm from the afternoon sun. She did, I said. All eyes turned. I'm Mrs. Whitaker, I told the clerk. The deed was finalized last week. Everything's in order. The clerk nodded and handed me a key card. Sloane's mouth parted, but no words came out. She blinked hard, like trying to reset a screen that had glitched. She stepped toward me. Mom Ione, I corrected gently. That's what the documents say. She swallowed, visibly recalibrating. You think this is fair? Hijacking a family event just to make a point? I didn't do this to make a point, I said. I did it to be seen. Gray took a half step forward, then thought better of it. Ari stood frozen at the edge of the porch, looking at no one. I turned to the clerk again. Please make sure all rooms not under my reservation remain locked. And if anyone has questions about guest status, refer to the list on file. Yes, ma'am, she said. I glanced back at the group. I didn't ask anyone to leave, I added. But I didn't invite anyone to stay. No one moved. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Sloane's hand tightened around her clipboard. She didn't yell. She didn't plead. She simply turned and walked back down the steps. The others followed silent, their shoes crunching on gravel that had once welcomed our summers. I stepped through the doorway, alone, the door swinging gently shut behind me. By morning, the story had made its way online. A neighbor forwarded me the link before I'd even finished my first cup of tea. The headline read, Estranged Mother Reclaims Family Home Through Legal Loophole. Below it, a grainy photo of me walking through the lake house gate. The article quoted an anonymous source close to the family who claimed I had used obscure clauses in the trust to override my daughter's rightful stake in the property. It mentioned that my late husband had been in declining health, that the home had always been a gathering space maintained by the younger generation, and that the transaction had shocked family members who believed the home to be held in joint trust. I didn't need to guess who the source was. Sloane had always been careful with words. She never lied directly. She simply offered versions of events that left the right gaps for people to fall into. My phone buzzed with a message from her, short and clipped. Sloane saw the piece. I didn't ask for it, just so you know. No apology, no responsibility, just distance dressed up as innocence. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the desk drawer in the study and pulled out the small flash drive I'd kept there since last summer. It held everything I had never intended to use. Screenshots of group messages from the months after Thomas passed, conversations I'd only seen because Nadine had quietly forwarded them. Sloane, Mom's not coming again. Honestly, it's easier this way. Sloane, she gets emotional and takes up too much space. Let's just not include her in the RSVP list. Cousin June. Should we tell her, Sloane, no? She'll find out if she's meant to. There were voice recordings, too. One from a call Sloane hadn't realized was on speakerphone. Her voice was unmistakable. She's fragile. Always has been. She was never built for this family. She turns everything into a performance and then acts wounded when no one claps. But the most important file sat under a label called Back Porch. Final. It was a video one I had taken a few months before Thomas's stroke, just the two of us sitting behind the lake house on a cloudy afternoon. He was wrapped in a blanket, holding a chipped mug. His voice was soft but steady. Ione knows how to keep things rooted, he said. She keeps the corners swept. She remembers who planted what. This place, this house, she made it livable. Not just livable, loved. I hadn't watched it in over a year. I played it once silently, then closed the screen. Then I wrote a brief email to a journalist I'd followed for years, someone who had written with integrity about elder care, about family estates and power dynamics. I attached the files. No message, no framing, just the truth. By late afternoon, I received a reply. Thank you. I'll handle this with care. That evening, I I took a walk down the narrow trail behind the house toward the dock. The wind was cooler. A heron skimmed the surface of the lake and vanished into the trees. When I came back inside, I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat in the quiet. The wind chime outside the kitchen window clinked once, twice, and then everything was still. The article ran on Sunday morning, how one woman reclaimed her voice and her home. It wasn't sensational. It was clear, direct, honest. It quoted Thomas's video. It named no villains, offered no sharp judgments, just a quiet unpacking of how a woman got erased and how she found her way back into the story. I read it once, then folded the printout into the back of the photo album and placed it on the shelf. By noon, Sloan called. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I'd seen the article. She just exhaled sharply and said, "Was this really necessary?" I let the question sit for a moment before answering. "Not for revenge," I said. "For remembrance." She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. Later that afternoon, Ari found me walking the lake trail. He didn't say much, just fell into step beside me, phone tucked in his pocket for once. We walked in silence past the tall reeds and the old split log, where Thomas used to rest with his fishing pole. After a while, he asked, "Why didn't you fight sooner?" I looked at him and smiled, not sad, just steady. "I didn't want to fight," I said. "I wanted to belong." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he let on. That evening, Nadine showed up with lemon cookies and a ragged sponge. "You didn't think you'd scrub out years of disregard without a partner, did you?" We cleaned together dust from the windowsills, the sticky edge of a drawer, a rusted hinge that groaned with memory. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We sipped tea on the porch afterward, listening to the breeze move through the trees and the faint clinking of the wind chime outside the kitchen. It had been crooked for years, but it still sang. When she left, I walked back through the house slowly. No voices, no echoes of what was lost, just the creak of floorboards, the quiet hum of belonging. I turned off the lights room by room from the inside,